Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, International Women's Media Foundation's webinar on Women's Deliver and Women's Health Reporting Grants. And this will be a conversation with journalists at the second half of the webinar. As Claudia just mentioned, that we will be first introduce our grant opportunities and then turning to the journalists. My name is Jin. I am the program manager here at the International Women's Media Foundation. I manage all the grants and awards. And here's Claudia.
Hi, my name is Claudia Gonzalez. I'm a senior program coordinator at the International Women's Media Foundation, and I work primarily on our Latin American initiatives, which includes the Reproductive Health Rights and Justice in the Americas program, which we also refer to as Women's Health. So we just wanted to quickly show everyone, in case you're not familiar with our website, this is where you can find all of our opportunities listed at IWMF.org. If you just scroll down on the home page, there is a section for current open opportunities, and you'll see we have a huge number of opportunities open right now. And so we're going to just quickly go over those in case you might have, it's possible that you haven't heard about some of them yet. And we do like to mention that you are able to apply for multiple opportunities at the same time if you're eligible. So, definitely feel free to check those out in addition to hopefully applying to one of these grants that we're going to discuss today. So to begin, we just wanted to quickly highlight the HEFAT courses that we'll be hosting in the United States this year. We're doing several in different parts of the United States leading up to the 2020 elections. So our next HEFAT will be taking place in North Carolina, and the deadline to apply for that one is February 15th. We are trying to prioritize journalists from the region where the HEFAT is taking place. So in this case, if you're based in North Carolina or another state in the region, we would highly recommend that you apply to this one. If you're outside of the region, you can still apply, but if there will be one taking place in your region later in the year, we might recommend that you participate in that one instead. Just to give you an idea, we'll be having one in Washington, D.C. in July, as well as some in the Midwest later on in the year. So will to be announced, but keep an eye on our website. We'll be opening the application for the DC HEFAT later this month. So right now you can apply for North Carolina. If not, stay tuned for more opportunities. Another opportunity that we have open right now is our Adelante reporting initiative. We'll be doing 2 different reporting fellowships in May. One is to Florencia, Colombia, and another is to Nogales, Mexico on the US-Mexico border. So if you're interested in participating in either of these fellowship opportunities, please apply for our initiative by February 23rd. And we are taking applications from individual journalists as well as pairs of journalists who would like to work together. And you can apply in English or Spanish.
We currently have an in-house coverage for Photojournalism Awards open. This one, you have to apply through the Visora platform, and it's completely free. The prize has a cash prize at the end for $20,000. It's really big for photojournalists, so definitely apply. You really don't have a requirement for minimum level of experience. Also, you don't have to work in a dangerous environment as a key. So I would say if you're dedicated to journalism and also passionate about the project you are reporting on, definitely apply. This is really one of the biggest photojournalism award for women around the world. We accept, we have the application form in English, French, Chinese, and Spanish this time. So feel free to share it with your friends as well.
We're also accepting applications for the Elizabeth Newport Fellowship. We're entering the 16th year of this program, and each year we select one fellow who will have the opportunity to be based in the United States for 9 months, where they will spend a semester in Boston attending classes at MIT as well as other neighboring universities, at the same time working at the Boston Globe. And then following that semester, they're based in New York City, where they will work at the New York Times for a couple of months. So right now we're taking applications until February 27th for our 2020 into 2021 Elizabeth Newport Fellow. If you're a journalist focused on human rights reporting, we really encourage you to check out this really huge opportunity.
We are open for this year's Courage in Journalism Awards. This one this is our 30th year. It's been around for 30 years. That really is the core of International Women's Media Foundation. Our work as our program. So I would really recommend journalists to nominate your friends and the people you know that you really admire or you are interested in their work and you think they've done really great work in around the areas that really show the courage. And we define courage really broadly. So you really don't have to say you have to be in the front line or in the war zone or doing things that really like dangerous to be nominated. So if you want to nominate yourself, we'll find someone else to nominate you, or you can nominate your friends and your colleagues as well.
Lastly, we just opened our opportunity for our second ever Gwen Ifill mentorship program. This last year was our inaugural year of the program, and we're now accepting applications for the 2020 cohort of mentees. So this initiative is especially focused at journalists who come from marginalized backgrounds or journalists of color, but it's open to all women journalists. So if you're interested in having a mentor, which can be a really life-changing opportunity, we highly encourage you to apply for this program.
So we're turning to the two grants we will be discussing today. First one is Women Deliver. This is a grant that's a completely new initiative with IWMF this year. We are accepting applications basically reporting from developing regions and publishing in developed countries. And we have, we'll talk about the country set criteria in a later slide. But this grant is going to be open for another 2 weeks, so definitely submit if you want to. The eligible criteria that obviously for us, almost all of our grants require you have to be a woman and non-binary individual. At the same time, if you are applying for a team, this team has to be woman lead, or you have to, and also you have to have at least 50% of the team members to be women or non-binary. And this has, you have to be a full-time journalist. I got a lot of requests about if you are like a student or you're a part-time freelancer. Unfortunately, this grant we require you to be a full-time professional journalist. We have a pretty soft, criteria for 3 years plus professional journalism experience. So I would say if you had graduated from college less than 3 years ago, I would still encourage you to apply. Because in the past we have worked with journalists that had some experience in college and then worked as a full-time. So just don't hesitate if you have some kind of professional experience in college, and you have to show some interest from editor. This is a softer requirement as well. So basically, you don't have to have a commitment letter to apply to almost every IWMF grants and opportunities, but you do have to tell us where you want to pitch to the story to, and also what kind of medium you're producing, including if you already have had some conversations with editors, and what's the feedback. Yeah, so the next slide, I'm going to talk about the very special criteria for Women Deliver Grant. This one I got a lot of requests of questions about. Basically, we just require you to publish with a news outlet in the following countries. We're primarily targeting at countries that are international outlets and in the US, and also as well as European outlets. And you don't have to publish specifically in English, but your proposal has to be in English.
Our second opportunity that we're going to discuss today is the Women's Health Reporting Grants. They're also known as our Reproductive Health Rights and Justice in the Americas program. This is our second time offering a round of grants under this program, and this initiative supports reporting on issues that affect the daily lives of women and girls in the region, including abortion and contraception access, maternal health, reproductive health policy, and abortion bans. Those are just a few different topics that we've reported on under this initiative, but the topic is overall reproductive health rights and justice in the Americas. For this program, we are seeking out stories specifically from Argentina, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, and Mexico. So, your pitches should have your focus should your reporting should focus in those countries. If you are looking to report on this topic in other countries, then some other IWMF grant opportunities would be a better fit for you. Last year, we had selected 21 grantees who've reported on a wide range of stories across the Americas, ranging from the forced sterilization of Indigenous women in the United States to sex education in El Salvador. And we're actually going to be joined by 2 of those grantees today who will talk more about their reporting and their experience, as well as answer any questions that you might have. The eligibility criteria are similar to those of the Women Deliver program and similar to those of other programs of the IWMF. Again, we ask that applicants must identify as women or as non-binary individuals. They should be working full-time as professional journalists, and they should have about 3 or more years of professional journalism experience. Lastly, it is important that you're able to show a proof of interest from an editor in your pitch or a proven track record of publication in the media outlets that you're pitching. So if you're a staff journalist, it's always helpful to have a letter, or if you're a freelance journalist, if you have an editor who's indicated interest or wants to provide a letter of support, that's fantastic. If you're not able to have a letter, that's all right. We just ask that you show kind of your history of publishing in those outlets and indicate like that you will be able to place the story where you're proposing to place it. And before we jump into our guest speakers, we just wanted to go over a few IWMF application tips.
Yeah, so first, obviously, don't make us dig. Usually we get over 100 applications per round when we do a grant opening. And it's really a great amount of documents we need to go through. So just make sure your intro text is brief and it's clear for us what you are trying to produce and what do you want to do with the money we give you and what kind of difference you can make with the IWMF support. And then second one would be like make sure your pitch and your budget are aligned with each other. This would be one of the things that I think we often see journalists miss, that they would pitch something and the budget would be looking a little bit suspicious of why it's so low, and there's no explanation of like whether or not they have another funding partner on this, or they would pitch something that is the project pitching look great. The number is just too high for us and doesn't really meet our criteria. For the Women Deliver grant, we do have like a very strict line that we don't fund anything above 10,000, and most of the grant will be given would be around the 5,000 ranges. So make sure you check out our website and really read into what we require for budget, and make your budget align with your pitch. And then the third one would be tell us why your project stand out from a crowd. As I said, if we're reading 100 applications, we want to make sure that your application is different with others. Especially if we get the same kind of pitch in the same country, we really want to see why you are the person doing it, and also how you're going to approach it differently with everyone else in the field. As well as you want to explain what are the current available reporting out there established on the same topic, and how you are going to advance the conversation instead of just repeating it.
Yes, and also for the women's health program, since we have done 2 years of programming around that initiative, we have a lot of stories on the IWMF's website that show what we've supported in the past and what we've reported on. So you can easily navigate to the reporting section at IWMF.org, and then you can also filter by program, so you can see what we've previously funded. If you're proposing something similar to what we funded, we would need to know, why you want to tell this story, what makes it different, or you can see kind of where the gaps are in coverage as well. So next up, we want to introduce our guest speakers today. First, I'm going to ask Eulimar to introduce herself, and let me just see how this works in terms of technical. I'm going to make you.
Let me try to hear me. I just unmuted.
Perfect. I hear you. I'm just going to make you a presenter. I think that will make it so that you can use your video. Great.
Perfect. So I'm Eulimar Núñez. I'm a Venezuelan journalist who has been living in the US for the last decade. And for the same period of time, I've been doing multimedia journalism for digital websites, first at the BBC, then at Univision Noticias, and currently in Telemundo Noticias. I've covered a wide variety of bits, but my main expertise is health, especially all the topics related to women.
Fantastic. And Eulimar, you first participated in the Women's Health Program during our 2018 reporting fellowship to El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. And then in 2019, you and your reporting partner, Ana Maria Rodriguez, also received a grant to continue reporting on reproductive health rights and justice. Could you describe the different stories that you've covered through the Women's Health Program?
Yeah, sure. So here's what we did in 2018. We visited 2 countries of the region of Latin America that completely ban abortion, because we wanted to show from the field how laws that prohibit this procedure don't actually work, don't actually stop them. And we wanted to see how they are obstacles for doctors who just want to do their job, and also wanted to show the consequences of restricting this access. So we chose specific stories of women that we were able to show. We just wanted to show the nuances. You know, this is such a sensitive topic and not everything is black and white. There are a lot of grays in between. So we chose the mother of the 16-year-old in the Dominican Republic who was pregnant with a few weeks and died after she was denied an abortion that would have basically saved her life. Another young woman in El Salvador who had an ectopic pregnancy and put her life in risk because a doctor just told her to go to her house and wait until she started bleeding. And just many more. What we saw is that access to abortion was not an isolated problem. These 2 countries also have like huge numbers of violence and abuse against women, lack of sexual education, no access to contraceptive. And all of that translates in high numbers of teen pregnancy. So we just saw that it's not only one thing, it's just everything connected. And that's why we decided to gather all of those stories in a multimedia bilingual project with video, text, audio, that you can actually scroll down and watch on your phone. And thanks to the IWMF support, we could focus on the reporting in the field, because they provided us transportation, local fixers, anything we need, especially in those places that we don't have any experience reporting on, right? Because I'm not from those places. I didn't know a lot before going there. What we did in 2019, we were lucky enough to get the IWMF support for 2 years in a row. And this time was a little different because we went by ourselves, and what we pitched was to do access to abortion, but here in the US, because even though the procedure is still legal in all 50 states, we know that there are already restrictions in place that complicates things, especially in the South. So we traveled to Alabama to visit the 3 clinics, the 3 remaining abortion clinics in the state, and produce multimedia stories for our website. And the different thing that we did this time was that we wanted to experiment with another platform, and we produced an episode for a Facebook Watch Jorge Ramos news program that had a lot of impact. So we also went to Georgia and Arizona and California, and we're still having to publish a lot of that reporting. But yeah, but that was basically it.
Thank you. And we're going to switch over to Jill now to have her introduce herself. So Jill, I'm going to make you the presenter. I'm not sure if we see you right now. I think you might need to turn on your camera.
The camera should be on. Can you hear me?
Well, that's all right. We hear you, and that's what matters. I also wanted to share the IWMF screen, but I'm not. Oh, I see you now.
Come on.
I see your screen. Perfect. Okay, I see you. Well, if you could introduce yourself, please, Jill.
Sure. My name is Jill Filipovic. I'm a full-time freelance writer currently based in New York City. I'm a weekly columnist for CNN, contributor to the New York Times, And I write for magazines typically about women's health and rights, often about reproductive rights and abortion access.
Fantastic. And you received a grant in 2018 along with photojournalist Nicole for the Women's Health Program. So could you tell us about the story that you and Nicole reported in Honduras?
Sure. So Nicole and I worked together a lot, and we reported a story in Honduras about the impact of restrictions on reproductive rights on the decisions of women and girls to migrate out of the country. So there have been a lot of really great reporting on the impact of violence against women on migration rates, but far less on the fact that Honduras outlaws not only abortion, but emergency contraception, which makes especially something like sexual violence much more, ends up making it have much more severe impacts on women because there are so few options of what to do, right? So we did a really narrative-driven story on women in Honduras who had experienced sexual violence and then were essentially, stuck. Many of whom were considering migrating, one of whom we talked to when she was in Mexico and had already left.
Thank you. We're going to switch back over to Eulimar. One moment.
Here I am.
Fantastic. Eulimar, what impact, if any, did the Women's Health Program have on your career?
I can surely say that it has changed my career. It has actually boosted it. And Anna's too, I think I can talk for her on this one. We've been really lucky to receive support for 2 years in a row, and this has allowed us to cover underreported topics that matters to us. And especially, in this, like, we work in newsrooms that are really breaking news centric, and with all of this 24/7 news cycle, it's really, really hard to make something that actually it's different, that has an impact, because it differentiates from the rest. So that's what the IWMF has allowed us to actually prioritize topics like this, because we don't need to convince our editors. We're bringing the money already. We're sending the pitch, doing everything, and telling them, like, we have the resources. You just have to tell us yes for us to go, But I've worked in newsrooms, and I also think about freelancers, like if they're, especially, like, for example, the newsrooms that I've been working for these last few years, they're like, the core is like immigration and other topics, So when you pitch something about women, like, it's not the first thing that they think about, in terms of even traffic and stuff like that. So it's so much easier when, and based on our experience, that's what we've seen, like, if we find the money and we find the resources, it's really like a win-win situation, because it's like buying our own time and be able not to do, just, it's not that we stop doing the rest of the things. And that's the challenge, that we have to do, like, extra work in order to make something different, but it's really valuable and worth it.
Thank you. Jill, what impact, if any, did a women's health reporting grant have on your ability to report on reproductive health rights and justice in Honduras?
Yeah, I mean, it was key. The sad truth is that a lot of publications obviously have cut their foreign reporting budgets, have cut their coverage generally of anything outside of the US and anything unrelated to Donald Trump, which is, extraordinarily frustrating, and I think makes all of our worlds smaller. And so the ability to have this grant, meant that we could do the story on the ground. We could gather, these incredibly compelling narratives, and Nicole took absolutely extraordinary photographs, that really put, I hate this phrasing, but, did put kind of a human face on a story that is often, reduced to far less than that. some of the photos Nicole was able to take were of, we interviewed a 12-year-old girl and her mom who had been raped, and she was quite pregnant, and she had a little stuffed bunny that she would carry with her everywhere. And I think to be able to show people, to both tell that story and also be able to show, here's a child who's so deeply and forever impacted by these laws, was a really extraordinary opportunity, and one that wouldn't have come to us if we had just pitched various magazines and asked for the budget to go do this. I should have said before, we ended up publishing this in Politico, and it was the cover of their Friday magazine, and a lot of people saw and read and shared the story. And it was a story that I hadn't seen told before that, so it was tremendously impactful.
Fantastic. And why did you apply for this opportunity with a reporting partner? I mean, a lot of our opportunities are open to individuals and pairs, so we just wanted to highlight your work with Nicole and to know how that experience was for you.
Yeah, so I applied with Nicole because I met her, we were both living in Nairobi, she's still there, and had worked together on similar stories. And in my experience, when you're reporting on survivors of trauma, and especially sexual violence, women who are talking about things like abortion, which is heavily stigmatized in much of the world, you have to tread very, very carefully. And working with someone that you trust and has the same kind of ethical and moral compass that you do and operates according to the same standards is really important, especially when you're talking about things like taking photographs. And so it was important to me to know, to be able to tell this story, both in terms of writing it out, but also to be able to tell it visually, which I think is often a very important and compelling aspect. And I wanted it told visually, as human kind of as close to the written product as possible. So I didn't want to be using stock photos, right, or just general AP photos, which are lovely for some stories, but for this one I wanted it to be very specific, which meant working with a photographer. And I wanted to work with a woman, and I wanted to work with someone who I knew would be quite sensitive and approach these issues from the same perspective as I did. And that was Nicole. And it was great. I mean, I love working with a reporting partner. I obviously trust her to do her job very well, but it's also nice on the ground to have somebody who's as invested in the story as you are, knows as much about what you're trying to do with the story as you do, and you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other and in real time have those conversations about is this the right way to go with how we're telling this? Should we go with person A or person B? How do we navigate this really challenging situation? I found it to be a really fruitful and useful experience.
Thank you. I also want to plug that if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll be getting to those shortly. Eulimar, based on your experience, have any best practices that you would like to share?
Yeah, just to connect with what Jill was saying, the first thing I would recommend is to not work alone. I also found a partner that basically knows a lot of things that I don't. She's a videographer. She's great with the camera, and yeah, just wanted to highlight what Jill was saying in terms of these topics. These topics are so sensitive, and you really the job here for a journalist is just to take the stigma out. For us who are actually talking to a Hispanic audience, that was the main challenge. Just to show people who you would think that that have certain opinions, having a different one, just trying to break with all the stereotypes that we have in our minds. I would also say that, yeah, that means a lot of collaboration and communication and thinking and deciding on how are we going to tell the story, why, what's going to be the approach, how are we going to tell it different. In order to have those decisions, it's better if you do it in a team. So I was also really lucky. And yeah, I've been working with Anna for a while now, and I've been really lucky because of that. I would also say to pre-produce as much as you can. Ask as many questions as you need to, read a lot about those places that you're going to and that you don't know anything about. And just be sure that publishing is not the last step. We have invested a lot of time in promoting what we're doing, and that has helped a lot to amplify the impact. We won a Gracies Award. We were nominated for an Emmy Award. So it's like the last thing was not publishing. That was actually the beginning. It's a lot of work, but in order to take the match out of it, you need to keep promoting it. And I've talked with journalism students in Mexico about the project, or like the impact just keeps amplifying. It doesn't end.
That's what we love to hear. And last question before we open Q&A. Jill, we were wondering if you, based on your experience, what advice you would give to someone applying for a reporting grant?
Yeah, and I would think about, first of all, why this story? Has this story been told before? If it has been, has it already been told well? Thinking about different angles on the same story. So when we were looking at Honduras, we looked at specifically, okay, what makes this place specific and different? And the outlawing of emergency contraception was something that really stood out. I had seen lots of very good reporting on violence against women in Central America and the impact on migration. And so kind of thinking about, okay, well, these two things probably overlap. I reached out to folks who are experts, right? So people who work in women's health and in Central America. And before I applied, asked, is there something here? I don't live in Honduras. It's not a place where I regularly work. And so I didn't want to kind of fold in my own preconceptions onto the place. So I did a little bit of groundwork before I even applied for the grant. And I found that really useful. So, figure out, has the story not been told? If I don't know a lot about this story, who can I ask to make my application stronger and to make sure that I'm actually proposing reporting on something that is a real dynamic that exists? And then I would say also think about, why are you the right person to tell this story? I've reported on reproductive rights and access all over the world. I know a lot of folks who work in that universe. There's been, a decade and a half of trust building there. And so I was pretty confident that I could get the necessary access that I needed, and that I could report the story in a way that felt honest and fair and also ethical. And so thinking that through, like, why this story and then why me? And I think folding that into your grant is really, really useful.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we're going to open up Q&A.
Before we open up a Q&A, I just want to add a couple points that for the Women Deliver grant, we do have a really long list of the targeting countries for publication. And I want to make sure that you guys understand that the targeting country we put up there are the countries that are top donors for women and girl issues. So this is really, we want to increase the media narrative on the positive side of women and girl stories in those countries, and really drive the investment in more gender-specific equality issues. And on the top of that, I really amplify that we need to, we really encourage partnership and collaboration for our grants, as just both of the grantees mentioned. We also, when we look at a team project, we also look at if there is, mentorship component within it. If there is a well-known journalist that if you are established and you are bringing someone with you for those reporting trips, that's also encouraging. So, and also talking about impact making, if you are considering more than one outlet, that's always a plus. And if you're considering publishing different medium, you write a piece and also you have a videographer going with you and make something else, that's also great.
Thank you, Jen. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to write them into the chat. I just want to circle back to two questions we received about the opportunities that we reviewed at the beginning of the call. The first question was about the Adelante reporting initiative, and to answer Miriam's question, this opportunity is open to journalists of all nationalities, so you can be applying from anywhere in the world to then go on a reporting fellowship to Florencia, Colombia, and Nogales, Mexico. So please do apply. And for Anne, you asked about the HEFAT. The DC HEFAT training. We're going to prioritize people, journalists who are attending the NAHJ NABJ conference, which will be taking place right before the HEFAT, and we'll also prioritize journalists based in the region. Something else that I don't think I mentioned before is that we are doing these HEFATs leading up to the 2020 election, so we're also prioritizing political reporters who will be covering the election cycle. So if you fall into any of these various categories, we definitely encourage you to apply, because I think this HEFAT will be specifically intended for you, but it's also open to all women journalists, all women political reporters in general. So if you don't fit neatly into one of these categories, but you still feel like you want that HEFAT, definitely do apply.
Yeah, I think all the International Women's Media Foundation's HEFAT are prioritizing journalists who traditionally wouldn't receive this type of training in their newsroom. So, or like if they're freelancers that just wouldn't receive this training elsewhere. Definitely apply if you falling into any of those categories. And I'll take the Amanda's question asking about would we consider a well-known NGO for a publisher, or does this has to be a traditional media outlet? So I think we really are walking into the fine line between advocacy and journalism. So I would generally say we take pitches from media outlets as a publisher. Usually we wouldn't consider NGOs.
The next question is from Sonia for Jill. So Jill, I'm going to make you the presenter, and I'll just read the question out loud for everyone. 1 second. The question is, Jill, how did you go about finding a Spanish language translator and fixer who could work with you and Nicole in the field to help you report your Honduras stories in a sensitive and culturally appropriate way?
That's a great question. So in Honduras, it was actually really, really easy because IWMF had worked with a translator on the ground for previous stories. And they recommended this woman, Jenny Núñez, who was absolutely amazing. And so we ended up working with her the entire time. And she was primarily doing translating work for us, but she helped out with a little bit of fixing as well. And then because I had various connections to women's health NGOs and international organizations, I actually did kind of a lot of the sort of first level fixing there. And then we kind of just followed sourcing down various paths. But I have had a hard time finding, sensitive fixers and translators in the past. And things that have worked really well for me have one been asking local NGOs that work on the issues you're reporting on. There are usually organizations that work on reproductive health, or that work on sexual violence, or that work on women's rights. Many of those organizations have done conferences with people who speak English. And so they've brought in translators before who kind of know the various, lingo in terms of art. I always have a conversation with a translator before I go, and I explain, this is the universe of things that I'm working on, and it includes abortion, it includes sexual violence. Are you comfortable translating on these issues? How do you feel about them? The last thing you want is hiring somebody who's going to be judgmental. I also, when I'm particularly reporting in a place that, is not where I'm from, and the translator is from there, that's a really valuable member of your team, not just for translating words, right? But also for telling you when you're overstepping, or, okay, she's saying this, but this is what that really means. And so having a conversation, making clear that you're relying on your translator for more than just interpret exactly what that person said is super helpful. Networks of journalists, whether it's the IWMF Facebook group or local foreign correspondence associations, are also really good resources to reach out to and ask, for translator and fixer recommendations. And being able to be really flexible on the ground. Nicole and I were reporting in Colombia. We had an amazing translator in one city, went to another one, hired a translator and a fixer on the advice of a fellow journalist, and it was the person was terrible and we had hired them for 4 days. And we essentially said at the end of the day, like, sorry, but this isn't working for us. And we just spent a bunch of extra money to fly our previous translator to a different city. Because it is so key to have somebody who is sensitive and thoughtful and good at their job.
And I will say that if you are working in some of the target countries like Colombia, Mexico, El Salvador, and Honduras, those are parts of the Adelante reporting initiative region for the IWMF. And so we do have trusted teams in those countries. And we are willing to speak with you on an individual basis about the folks that we do recommend. So if it's a country where the IWMF has operated on the ground, we're always happy to help as we can. Let's see. All right, we have a couple more questions to go through. The next one is from Miriam. Jen, do you want to respond?
Yeah. So Miriam asked, can we publish in EU, US, or Australian broadcaster offices based in Middle East, for example, or it must be published inside of the country listed? So we're generally looking at how the content will be distributed. So if you are working for a broadcasting company office in the Middle East, if they are going to be picked up in those countries, I think that'll be fine. We don't have like a strict line of like, oh, you have to strictly like publishing within that one country. But if those, I assume the things you produce will be picked up by their main station in Australia or EU, US. I think that'll be okay. For the next question asked about the proof of interest from an editor, we really just take the kind of proof of interest softly. So it can be email, it can also be screenshots, or it can be in any format that you feel comfortable to share. And you can black out information set if you need. But in general, we just want to have some proof that you are pitching it and where you are pitching to. So we can make the grant confidently.
And the more level of detail that you're able to provide in that explanation is helpful. So perhaps you've had a conversation with an editor who said like they definitely want to consider your story when you come back. Another one might be like, oh, we're very committed to this, or like we're in, just kind of explaining where you're at in that process is just helps us be informed about what our expectations should be.
Yeah, I think we understand that for freelancers, especially for either videographers or photographers, that is extremely hard for you to get an upfront commitment. And we definitely consider that as well. So don't worry if you are a photographer, you don't have a formal commitment. Just let me know what are the things you're currently working on.
Definitely. Rosario asked if the Women's Health Grant gives money destined for salaries during the investigation, or if it's only for transfers, fixers, etc. If you're a freelance journalist, if you're not in a salaried position, you definitely can include a salary as a line item within your grant budget, just making sure to kind of break it down the way you would for any other line item, explaining how many days the salary is for, at what rate, etc. Let's see. Sorry, we're just reading the questions.
I'll just jump to Maggie first. So Maggie asked about the process. So for most of the IWMF grants, that we do an internal selection first, and then we narrow it down to about 30, and then we have like a standing committee, or we work with editors and journalists to actually make the final selections. So this is a really like a multi people's work in our team, and then including outside experts as well.
Samantha said, my reporting partner and I plan to report on an issue in the state in southern Mexico where we both live. This means our budget will likely be lower since our travel will only be in state. Can you say a little more about what the budget should look like and what can and can't be included in the budget? Do you want to respond to that overall for grants in general?
Yeah, so I think Women Deliver grant, this one is specifically not including your own salary for sure, and but I think we have listed things that are just the basic hard costs on our website. For another grant that IWMF is offering, Fund for Women Journalists, for that one you can include stipend.
So to clarify, for Women Deliver, we cannot include salary, but for women's health, you can include salary. So that's just a distinction there. But again, so for the budget, you might include things like if you're working with a fixer, for how many days, if you're working with a translator, for how many days, and at what rate are you estimating that? Are you working with a driver, for how many days? Do you need other types of transportation, buses, flights? We definitely ask everyone to include insurance, travel insurance. If you don't already have it, we want to make sure you're insured while you're on the ground and reporting. Do you need, any other type of safety equipment? Do you need, access to a photographer? It could be a wide range of things.
I think all the budget are considered on a case by case scenario. So I would say just definitely put all of them in, and we can have a conversation. So actually, I just talked about our selection process of like having a committee and actually read everything together and make a group decision together. Within that process, we will narrow it down to a small amount, and we will do one-on-one interviews, and we record all those interviews. Everyone will receive a standard set of questions as well as the additional questions we have. After we recorded it, we have the committee to listen to every single one, and we make a collective decision at the later stage. So for those ones who enter the interview round, you will have the opportunity to explain more of what exactly you're looking for, and also what help you want to receive from us in addition to just what you put in the proposal, and also what are the challenges that you're currently facing and all that. So I would say it's a pretty in-depth a process.
Definitely. And for any of our opportunities, if you become a finalist and we have questions about your budget, we'll just circle back around with you on that and clarify if we need to tweak the budget, or if we think something needs to be added or subtracted. We can discuss that in more detail. Yeah, especially at the last decision round, we are actually working towards our own budget. So in that round, we need to really look at how many people are entering the last round and how much we can afford. So so at the end of the day, we definitely will have a conversation with budget. Erin, yes, the presentation, we're recording this webinar, so we're going to upload it to the IWMF's YouTube channel immediately after this, and so it will be available online as a resource. Thank you for asking. I think we've answered everyone's questions so far. Great, we just got one more. Okay, cool. So let's see, Sonia is asking Eulimar and Jill if you're able to share the ballpark of your budget amount for your projects. So Eulimar, let me go over to you if that's something that you're comfortable with sharing.
Can you see me there? Yeah, I think so.
We hear you, so I think we're good.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, the first one, I cannot talk about budget because we just got the trip. I mean, you guys took us to El Salvador and the Dominican Republic for 10 days in total, 5 and 5, and you provided us with transportation, hotel, food, fixers. We didn't need translators, but yeah, basically with everything we needed. And the second one, we asked for $10,000. And we got, I think, 8,000, and yeah, that's what we sent a very specific budget explaining what we're gonna use the money for, and yeah, they gave us the money.
Fantastic. And let me switch over to Jill if she's comfortable sharing in a moment. Where did her name go? Sorry.
Hi. So I would go through my email. I'm not 100% sure. It was I think we were approved for close to $10,000, if not 10, but it was somewhere between 7 and 10. And to do the budget, I mean, I did, you just have to do a bunch of research, right? So it's 2 round-trip plane tickets. I looked on Kayak, how much are hotels in each of these cities. Asked around about the kind of going rate for fixers and translators in the area, and how much we could expect to spend on food and driver's rates and all of that stuff. So we broke it down pretty specifically, and it did require a little bit of kind of pre-research, since obviously, you know, things like hiring a driver for the day can be wildly different in terms of cost from place to place. But yeah, I think between 7 and 10 was where we wound up.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to talk about the budget because I actually don't know Eulimar or Jill's budget because I wasn't involved in their selection round. But I want to make sure that you understand that the budget is really your roadmap to how you're gonna create that project. So really dig into details of where you're gonna spend the money and where possibly there can be places that you need the money. Don't look at other people's budget saying, oh, they made like 8,000, I should make exactly the same. That's definitely the wrong way to approach it. We want to see like how you are thinking smartly, how you spend the money at the same time. Go back to your pitch to see whether it's making sense.
Yes, and we do, both Eulimar and Jin had fairly large and ambitious projects, and we do fund, some projects at that $8,000 or $10,000 level. But of course, the amount of funding we have is limited, and the higher your budget is, that we're giving a fewer amount of the larger grants because we do want to share these opportunities with as many people as possible. So we don't want to, encourage or discourage you one way or another, but just explain that. Jill's budget was on a fairly, for a large project, and then other people were funded at smaller amounts and also published fantastic projects. So it kind of just depends what you're imagining for your scope, as Jin mentioned.
Exactly. And the Women Deliver grant, not including the stipend, is because the grant is eventually going to be on a smaller scale compared with the reproductive health grant. So making sure that you keep that in mind as well. Or some other...
So we've gotten a few more questions. I'm not sure if I fully understand the stipend question from Miriam. Jin, are you?
The stipend for us is just basically considered as a salary for you to produce that piece for the reproductive health grant.
Samantha, you said that your partner only speaks Spanish and you speak Spanish and English. Yes, that's totally all right. Right now, we're only accepting the women's health and women deliver applications in English just because of the people involved in the selection process. But definitely for women's health, we encourage working with people across different countries and different experiences. And so we do really value receiving applications from teams with, perhaps someone who's based or lives in the region, and then maybe someone else is in the US. We think that's a really fantastic way to collaborate as well. So if someone on your team doesn't speak English, that's perfectly all right. We just ask that you, complete that application in English. But that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, same as for Women Deliver grant. You don't need to have perfect English level to receive the grant, though we do require you to apply in English. And likely if you don't speak English or Spanish, if we don't have the staff capacity to actually do the interview with you, that will be an issue. But if you're working with a team, speak various of languages, that's totally fine. So the Valerie asked the question about Women Deliver grant. Do we need to have a specific theme that our story ideas will explore, or can we propose a set of profiles on different women and their initiatives who are agents of positive changes in their countries? I think that's actually a theme. The second question. So we really want to keep our mind open on whatever you want to produce, and the idea sounds fine for me.
Fantastic. Well, we're running out of time here, but we definitely want to thank Eulimar and Jill for joining us today and for sharing their experiences with us. If you have any further questions after this webinar, you can email me for the Women's Health Program. My email is Claudia Gonzalez, which is my last name, at IWMF.org.
And you guys are welcome to schedule with me as well. If you find my staff page on our website, I actually have a link that you can book 15 minutes schedule with me to specifically ask questions. So feel free to do that.
And we just want to plug our IWMF social media channels. This is the best way to stay up to date on all of our opportunities, in addition to checking out our websites and signing up for our emails on the homepage of our website. So if you don't follow us already, please do that, and you'll be able to learn about the opportunities that come up during the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.